This is the wild North American beaver. It was the lure of this large aquatic animal's lustrous fur that first stimulated the exploration of the remote marshlands and waterways of North America.
Overhunted since the early 1600s, then recently protected as its natural enemies were almost eliminated, the beaver has become a poignant example of how a wildlife system can be thrown out of balance. In northern Canada, glaciers have gouged lakes out of solid rock, and the rigorous climate is hostile to all life. Here, the beaver's problems are most obvious.
From golden fall through barren winter to budding spring, Cousteau and men of Calypso will witness the renewed struggle of the beaver for continuance. They will observe the beaver in his role as architect and engineer, his remarkable ability to build protective homes, to harvest food for winter survival, and to construct dams that stabilize the flow of streams and create fish ponds which improve the habitat of many forms of wildlife. The beaver's projects sometimes conflict with the projects of man. A wildlife management team from the Canadian Department of Natural Resources live traps an adult beaver. Beaver dams built high enough to maintain a livable level around their lodges may cause flooding of the few roads at the edge of the wilderness. When this animal instinctively prepared for a harsh winter, he had no way of knowing he would become a nuisance. In accordance with conservation measures, the beaver will be moved further north to be released beyond the pressures of human populations.
A few years ago, this animal would have been shot and skinned. Today, it is relocated in an area where hopefully its labors will be appreciated. In territory unknown to him, the beaver sniffs the autumnal air. He is confused. Pilgrim of the wild, he must have enough time to build a new home or find an abandoned lodge before winter strikes. Otherwise, he will die.
Now the Cousteau team will follow the beavers to their uncertain destinies in the Canadian North. To study the fate of the beaver in a diminished wilderness, the Cousteau exploration team leaves Lac La Ronge for the lakes and rivers of Canada's Upper Saskatchewan. Below, there are no roads, only a lacework of woods and water, an empire first claimed by the beaver. The pontoons set down on remote Foster Lake. The moose have already shed their antlers, which will grow back in early spring. The men unload building materials to establish the only camp on Foster Lake's pristine shores. The cabin must be soundly constructed for their prolonged stay through the imminent northern winter. For the moment, the men enjoy an Indian summer. The crew of Calypso turned carpenters is assisted by Cree Indians. First to enter the cabin is the Indian's Irish setter. Captain Cousteau arrives.
Who's the Russian? Yeah, take a picture. Oh, cavalier.
Bonjour, ça va? Eh bien? Oh, ça va?
Très bien, vous.
How are you? Hey! Welcome.
Boy, I don't think you could find a better place. Did you bring all this sand, too, or?
Yeah, it was flown in from the south of France.
No, from South Pacific.
No.
The Cousteau team has been joined by an authority on beaver behavior, biologist Keith Hay.
See, that's deep there. Very deep, very deep. Here we disappear.
Hay and Cousteau trudge through a beaver-created bog.
It's like quicksand. Huh?
It is.
It's just
Well, you just
slowing
keep
you
going
down. It's like quicksand.
This is almost like an island.
Terrible.
A mobile island.
When I was describing some evidence of their territoriality, I may go clear down underneath here, but this is one of the scent mounds, they call them. And the beaver brings up a couple hands full of this wet sedges and grasses, places it like this. And if you smell very closely, you can smell a very sweet odor.
Is it it?
Yes, it is.
Let me check. Je le remplace, hein?
Dominant males secrete a few drops of castoreum from their abdominal glands to warn migrating beavers not to enter their domain.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Very clear.
Can you see this? One of their canals.
Beavers burrow canals beneath the bottom of the pond that lead to their foraging grounds.
That's how far you can go down under.
Yeah. And where does it go? Inland
It
or?
goes inland and then it comes up into the bushes, into the willows in the background. And this way he's completely protected from any predators till he gets to his feeding area.
Shorelines and marshes where water-loving white birch and trembling aspen trees intermix are preferred feeding areas. Philippe Cousteau and a scouting party will portage inland to a secluded beaver pond, much as did European trappers of the 17th century.
Man had abruptly become the beaver's prime predator, coming to the golden wilds of North America for fur. So it also was the musky product of the beaver's castor glands, which, from the time of the early Greeks, was regarded as a cure-all for man's ailments from colic to hysteria. Photographing the beaver is a challenge. He is a night shift worker. He comes out of his lodge in the late afternoon when the light is fading. Beavers' most highly developed sense is that of smell, and they are wary.
The beaver is a vegetarian, feeding upon the thin layer of cambium beneath the bark. The beaver's conical lodge, its home and shelter, is made of branches and mud. The living chamber within the lodge is above water level, but its entrance is as much as 4 feet underwater. Near the lodge, the winter food reserve or feed bed is stored in a pile from the surface to the bottom of the pond. Yearlings of the colony carry branches rich in nutrients to the feed bed. Philippe now films one of the adults bringing up mud with its forepaws to reinforce his lodge for approaching winter.
The pond will soon be frozen over, and trips to the food cache will be made under the ice. Throughout the winter, branches will be brought back underwater to the snug living quarters above the surface of the pond. Tirelessly, beavers work until dawn. Late fall is the busiest season. Branches are towed to their dams that must be heightened to assure enough open water to permit foraging under the ice. When beaver dams cause flooded roads, hard choices are made. Man and beaver share the ability to alter their environment, but when in conflict with civil engineers, it is nature's engineers who must move on. Some of the troublemakers are trapped and relocated. Within existing regulations, beavers are deported 100 miles away from the road. Relocating them too late in the season may be sending them to their death.
So this is 1 year old, huh?
Yeah, 1 year old in June, yeah.
Do you think there's a whole family here?
There could be, or there might be just two of them just starting up on their own.
Do you know if it's male or female? It's very hard to tell.
It's pretty hard to tell.
Philippe requests and receives custody of 2 beavers. Winter is nearly upon them, and the disoriented pair may not have time to construct a new lodge. Far from the roads of creeping civilization, the Calypso team will provide the displaced animals with a winter home.
At Foster Lake, the beavers share our quarters. The smaller one, we find to be a female, seems traumatized by the trapping. We call her Cassie. The cautious young male we call Foster, after the lake. We had heard that one might make friends with wild beavers by feeding them sliced apples. We tried. Our new guests will not go hungry this winter, but to survive, they must remain with us. We wonder, as we give them food and shelter, whether we will be able to establish a relationship with Foster and Cassie. And if we do, will they remain pure beavers, or will they become like zoo animals, totally dependent upon us, with deeply perverted behavior? After residing in our cabin during the long winter, when spring comes, will they be able to return to the wild and in nature make their own home?
Winter comes to Saskatchewan. Beaver lodges, as well as the Cousteau cabin, are covered and insulated by falling snow. Secure within their man-made abode, Foster and Cassie snooze, while Soumillon prepares a hatch for them, leading under the floor to an exterior enclosure. It is hoped the beavers will use the hatch, for the pen below will keep them in touch with their natural environment. The cage door is opened. Foster, the young male, is the first to venture forth.
Foster snoops around our house. He uses his tail as a sitting prop for balance, as when he cuts down a tree or when he peers through the forest for predators. Foster finds the hatch, but he refuses to go down the hole. Rather than attempt to escape to the wilderness, Foster prefers to return to his established territory, where Cassie still languishes in the corner.
Long John's long winter. Monotony is dispelled by the arrival of Spunky the kitten, a gift from an Indian trapper.
Mignon, mignon. Eh, que bestiole.
The northern world now becomes less hospitable to life. With the cabin's water pipes frozen, a hole must be punched in the thickening ice of Foster Lake. All through the winter, the hole must be kept open to provide the house with water every day. The Cousteaus discuss an aerial reconnaissance to be made when the blizzard breaks. With much interest, Spunky watches the beavers, who now have the run of the cabin. Does Foster consider her an intruder on his newly established territory? Bernard Delamotte has charted beaver lodges on the lake shore. Spunky's attempts to engage Foster in play are ignored, but she is determined to get some action with an animal whose teeth can fell trees.
After being grounded for weeks, through brisk and clear air, we lift off for our first aerial view of northern Saskatchewan under a thick coat of snow. The beauty beneath us belies the tough climatic conditions here for both men and animals. A lone moose, struggling through deep snow, searches for food.
The moose feeds on leaves and bark and is especially fond of water plants. There will be no food in abundance until spring. The men will try to help the moose scattered throughout the area with a hay drop. Undernourished animals fall prey to wolves in the winter. This moose and his solitary fellows will find the hay, for it has the sweet smell of summer grasses. In the cabin, the two beavers tolerate the Cousteau crew, but shun Spunky's overtures to play. While Foster grooms, he keeps an eye on Spunky, alert for sudden ambush. For Spunky, the smaller Cassie is fair game. Cassie is forced into hiding. Now Foster is subjected to some diversionary action, which finally he cannot tolerate.
Reste ici, Swanky.
Foster just wants to be left alone. Spunky has succeeded where the Calypso team has failed. Foster, who till now has ignored the hatch, goes down the ramp to escape the spirited cat. Driven into the exterior pen, Foster is temporarily reunited with the wilderness. By snowmobile, the distribution of hay is continued. The unrelentingly severe winter is a continuing hardship for the moose and other animals of the wilderness community. At the Cascades, Bernard and Yvonne come upon the unexpected. A beaver is sighted. Then a second beaver, slipping and sliding down the frozen stream bed.
It is not normal for beavers to venture on the ice. These are large adults, transplanted too late in the season to build or find a lodge, the beaver's fortress against the cruel winters here. In the dead of winter, a beaver is completely out of his element outside his lodge. The hungry creatures may have wandered for miles before finding this meager food. We assume they are mates, for successful relocation is more probable when pairs are moved together. We will try to help them.
At the Cascades across the lake from the Cousteau cabin, the two displaced beavers are subjects of concern. The wilderness is not gentle with relocated beavers, unable to find a lodge and exposed to winter.
The beaver rubs oil from his abdominal glands into his fur to waterproof it. If he became wet to the skin, he could perish. When the earth is covered with ice and snow, the greatest threat is starvation. We offer sliced apples in an attempt to give nourishment to the homeless animals. The beaver is so hungry, yet so frightened. We will continue to feed them for as long as we can follow them. Because of territorial fights, they will not be able to take refuge in lodges already occupied by other colonies. Perhaps they will be able to find an abandoned lodge to claim as their own. We are amazed to see the beavers leave the shoreline and swim under the ice of the lake. Francois Charlet photographs them as they reappear at our waterhole. In most unusual behavior, they have swum 125 yards under the ice from the Cascades to the Hall. We regret we cannot catch them and take them inside our cabin. It might cause territorial conflicts. These large, full-grown adults might seriously injure the smaller Foster and Cassie. We must find other ways to assist them.
To help the homeless beavers through the winter, the men skim across the frozen lake to collect a food supply for them. Their objective is a stand of birch. After autumn leaves fell, rich nutrients were stored under the bark of the beavers' favorite trees.
Now, to go with our feed bed, we construct a lodge for the displaced animals.
On va couper le bout, non?
To entice them to use the man-made shelter, sliced apples are placed inside, along with dry bedding. Are beavers completely programmed animals, or do they have the flexibility to take advantage of such an opportunity? As they dive, we wonder if they will use the simulated lodge.
Meanwhile, in the cabin, it's supper time.
Et voilà pour toi.
Apples are not part of the normal diet of beavers of the north. But for Foster and Cassie, now coming out of her shell as Spunky settles down, sliced apples are becoming a delicacy. Unfortunately for Bernard, the coffee is not. Foster has grown so fond of apples that a slice is not enough. He's got to have the whole thing. In this way, cases of apples disappear.
That night, we dive to see if the two lost beavers are making use of the substitute home we built for them.
At the underwater opening to the lodge, the men are surprised to find not the two adults, but a lone yearling. He must have wandered from his colony, as young ones sometimes do.
The way the beaver paddles with his webbed feet reminds us of a duck. He also uses his front paws and achieves bursts of speed by powerful vertical strokes of his flat tail. Now it is time for the young squatter to get out of the pool, up into his dry living quarters. The refusal of the two large adults to use the lodge we constructed for them is saddening, as their physical condition worsens. Charlie continues to film them as they single-mindedly continue to swim back and forth under the ice from the hole to the cascades across the lake. Last fall, their tails were thick with fat stored for winter. Now their tails are thin, depleted. They plod on toward their uncertain future. Their coarse guard hair are matted with ice, for the beavers no longer have the energy to groom themselves. An apple is quickly accepted. Hunger has grown stronger than fear. Gone is the caution displayed before. Once more, the beavers move on. If only their instincts would lead them to the ponds beyond, where they still might be able to find an abandoned, beaver-built home.
In northern Saskatchewan, the air temperature is now 55 degrees below zero. The two stray beavers have not been seen for several days, neither near the cabin nor at the cascades. The men will dive through a hole they have cut near a lakeside lodge to see if by any chance the animals have established residence there. The divers come upon the feed bed. There is evidence that part of a branch has been newly eaten. Nearby is the lodge. The tunnels leading to the hollowed-out nest above the ice line are clogged with debris. The lodge is not inhabited. Theoretically, trapped beavers could, with their sharp teeth, gnaw through the ice. But practically, a ceiling of solid ice is probably more than they can handle. It is hoped that the beavers have journeyed on, and that their instinct has guided them at last to safe lodging. Now, after 8 months of winter, spring comes to the northern wilderness. Beavers come out of retirement and dive for the first succulent underwater shoots. Ducks return from the south to breed, while snowy owls that have seen the winter through already have wide-eyed hatchlings. The season of biological beginnings in nature also gives men of Calypso a fresh start. The endangered American bald eagle appears. For spring's emergence, the Indians have a word, yoho, signifying awe and wonder. Accompanied by Keith Hay, Captain Cousteau crosses Foster Lake to return to the river and beaver ponds earlier studied by the ecologist and Cousteau.
You see, Keith, now we are getting to the dam. So you see there is a little breach in the dam, and we thought that they would repair it.
This is pretty much characteristic, I think, of the beaver. And in the spring, they are not really worried about repairing their dam because there's always plenty of water with the spring runoff and the snow melting. And as you can see, the pond is very full despite the two breaches. So they've got all summer to repair it. They're in no hurry.
You see that disaster area over there? It looks like a bombardment.
Well, that, I think, all went into the food cache over by the lodge.
Yeah.
And that was their winter food supply, which is now all eaten and gone down the stream here and held up by the rocks down there.
Guy Jouas lowers a microphone through the air vent of the river lodge to listen in on the living quarters. Heard are the sounds of a beaver family, including the cooing of nursing newborn kits. The happy sounds of a successful lodge. Recrossing Foster Lake, the Cousteau party approaches an area where lively beavers were studied before the lake froze. Bernard has reported that to his surprise, he has seen no spring activity around the lodge built on the rocky shore of the lake. The lodge will be monitored. There are no sounds.
Indeed.
It was obviously abandoned.
Now, if it was abandoned in the middle of the winter, the chances that beaver would survive it, very small.
Very small.
Finally, we decide to open the lodge. Bernard and Yvon dig carefully toward the nesting chamber. Why was the chamber abandoned during winter? Have the tenants been attacked by predators? The emotion we feel is more intense than that of archaeologists about to open the secret vaults of a pyramid.
Revealed within a nest of shredded sticks is the reason for the oppressive silence.
Dead.
Dead. Well, one of the ironies of nature is a misjudgment on the part of animals, and this is a beautiful example of misjudgment. Beavers have been known to cut down trees, and the trees actually fall on them and kill them, and here was a case where the beavers misjudged the depth of the water and were not able to dig a tunnel from under their lodge to their food cache that was deep enough to sustain them throughout the winter. And as a result, they were not able to get to their food supply, and they do not hibernate. They must eat all winter. So they died of the elements, probably of freezing and of famine. These are very thin, young. This is a yearling, and this is a mature adult. So evidently, oh, here's a kit. Well, no, this is a young of the year too, last year's babies. I'm finding a lot of tiny pieces of wood back here, little chips that look like was the very last meal. Oh, wait, look at this. That looks like it was their last meal. Incredible. A completely almost round piece of wood that was chewed by them.
They were starving.
Eating everything, probably even the inside of their lodge. Well, it's obvious that this mother and her babies died from starvation. If we take a look at her and hold her, we can see that she's very, very thin. There's hardly anything in her stomach. And she should weigh around 55 to 60 pounds, a mature female like this, but she barely weighs maybe 30 pounds, 35. She's completely
Poor animal.
starved. A terrible death in there, and so with her babies.
So she probably stayed with the babies until they died.
There was no alternative. She was imprisoned with ice and snow, and her judgment that that ice would freeze clear to the bottom was poor, and as a result, her entire family was lost.
And the male had probably tried to get away by the hole that we saw. Probably, otherwise he would be there.
There's been no trapping in this area, has there?
Not here, no.
So, therefore, there should be a male in this colony. And evidently the male did escape, and where he went, nobody knows.
The beavers built their lodge in shallow water over solid rock. An engineering mistake made their home a tomb. Foster and Cassie have been seen safely through the winter. Now it is time for the young beavers to return to the wild. After their long confinement, they may be reluctant to leave the food and comfort of the cabin. It is little Cassie, the shy female, who takes the lead. Millenniums ago, her ancestors were giant land animals over 7 feet long, weighing 800 pounds. Today, the beaver is ungainly on land, but Cassie is eager to re-enter her natural environment. As Foster follows, I am mindful that all our patient efforts to establish a bond with our protégés have been totally unsuccessful. We offer them affection, and although they accepted our shelter and took our food, they remain defensive. Now, fat and still independent, they flee to freedom.
Cousteau follows the beavers and sights one coming up for air. The other one darts under the Zodiac, and then away over the rocky bottom toward the marshy end of the lake.
Foster and Cassie will not make a mistake in selecting a site for their home. Early next winter, when they are 3 years old, they will begin to breed. Devoted mates, their relationship can be expected to endure throughout their 20-year lifespan. Observing Foster and Cassie, we wonder where instinctive behavior ends and intelligence begins. Whether these extraordinary architects of dams, lodges, and canals are mere program automatons, or whether they have a kind of intelligence radically different from ours, beavers certainly typify one of nature's most bewildering mysteries.
In the wilderness of northern Canada, Cousteau has studied the condition of the beaver under the twin challenges of a harsh winter environment and the impact of man's claim on the world around him. Cousteau and ecologist Keith Hay.
What would you say the future of such a lodge is? Are they going to stay there for a long time, or do you think they have exhausted the food supply?
Well, Jacques, you know, the beaver here in the lake region of Saskatchewan, I think they live by a law of natural economics, perhaps, like we would, a law of dollars and cents. If the cost of living gets too high, that is, it just takes too much effort, and the food supply gets so darn hard to obtain, then the cost of living is too high and they have to move on.
Human expansion, hunting, and trapping have already seriously reduced and endangered beaverland. Yet, well-intended efforts to protect the beaver have demonstrated once again that our intervention in nature is always unpredictable and often has sad consequences. Only as we learn more about the complex mechanisms of life will we be able to efficiently preserve what is left of nature's once boundless legacy.